Welcome to the Academy of General Dentistry podcast series featuring Dr. George Schmidt. Each episode features experts in the field of dentistry who share insights and inspiration to help you succeed. Let's get started.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. We have another great show for you today as we come back from our brief hiatus here, as we welcome Dr. Amrita Patel. Amrita, how are you?
I'm awesome. Glad to be here. And most importantly, I'm warm.
Yeah, really excited to have you on the show, and we'll see how that matters in a few minutes here. But before we begin, make sure you subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and ring that bell. That way, you'll be among the first to be notified of all things AGD. So, Dr. Amrita Patel, as I said, is a general dentist and an award-winning author and national educator. She's a multi-practice owner based in Westchester County, New York, and Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Dr. Patel also contributes to the profession through her writing as a leadership columnist for AGD Impact, and is a member of the Editorial Advisory Board for Dental Economics and a few other publications, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. So that's pretty interesting, Dr. Patel there. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your story and how this all began?
It is an interesting kind of journey. So I graduated from dental school, did a GPR, and went into practice with my father. I am a general dentist, like you said. He is an endodontist, and we built a group of family-owned general and specialty group practices in Westchester County, where I am now. You mentioned that I do a lot of educating around the country, and in that capacity, I got sent to the South Dakota Dental Association now 3 years ago to do some programming for them at their annual meeting, and they very nicely sent their state's president-elect to pick all the speakers up at the airport, and we got married last year. So I have an organized dentistry love story. And my husband,
Wow.
yep, so my husband had a daughter in high school, and he was president of his state dental association. So she graduated, he finished that obligation, and we are thankfully back in New York. So
Oh my gosh. So I knew you got married, but I didn't know the backstory to that whole thing.
yeah,
That's pretty exciting.
yeah, great member benefit.
Wow. So you're back in New York full time?
Yep, full time.
So you're not in Sioux Falls. You mentioned you were cold. I thought maybe
Yeah,
that was
that
part
was
of
the
the deal.
reference. Yep, that was the reference that I'm very thankful I'm not cold because that temperature gets to like negative 30 Fahrenheit. So,
Oh my gosh, that's
yeah.
crazy. So, I know you do a lot of things. You've got a lot of irons in the fire and you're really busy. And I know a couple of things you do. You're an educator, of course, but you focus a lot on leadership. And I know you're right about leadership for AGD Impact. So let's talk a little bit about that. What does leadership mean to you and how do you present that to people?
Yeah, so I did a leadership program, an institute a few years ago, and the woman who taught that was a dean, yep, at the Duke University School of Business, and she defined leadership in this way. She said, "Leaders empower others to achieve a common goal." And that has stuck with me since she said that, because there's so many different definitions, there's so many different ways you can look at it. And I think no matter what part of your life you're talking about, whether it's personal, whether it's professional, whether it's what you want your day to go like, whether it's you want to make sure that everyone leaves on time, you can have the best ideas, but unless you have empowered others to join you on that journey, I don't think you can really be an effective leader. So the long answer to your short question is that's what I think it is.
You bring up a good point because when a lot of people they hear the word leadership or they think of leaders, they think of, people that are in elected office and things like that. But leadership, as we all know, really extends much deeper than that, right? Because
Mhm.
everything from your team to who you interact with. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I think when it comes to our practices and our professional lives, as an associate starting out, and no matter kind of where you are in your journey, you still are in charge of the team around you, whether that's your hygienist that you work with, your front desk, your assistants. If you don't communicate what you want your day to look like, or how you want your patient scheduled, or what you want the flow to be like, it doesn't matter how big or small that team is, you're still a leader. And I think many people, and I'm guilty of this as well, think that they have to go at everything alone. And we sometimes fall into the trap of thinking that only we can do everything. And yeah, you're probably really good at it, but it's probably too much for one person to handle. And that's why empowering others and then making sure that they're accountable is so important in that growth journey.
Yeah. So I know you do a lot of consulting, and I'm assuming this is one of the things you consult on. So what do you, and I know I've been to some courses about leadership and things like that. And, you may do a weekend course and you go back in on Monday, but you always wind up with some resistant staff or people that are pushing back and maybe some advice on how to handle that kind of situation.
Yeah, so I think again, you can buy the most expensive piece of equipment, you can bring in the most expensive consultant or new education system, but unless you've got team buy-in, and that doesn't just mean blindsiding everyone with something new, that means having the conversations beforehand as a preparation and then introducing that, whatever that is, a concept, a piece of equipment, a new team member. That piece to me is so important because I hear it from teams around the country. We had no idea, right? We didn't know how to use that, or we didn't know this was coming. And had we been involved in any of that process beforehand, it would have been a completely different conversation. So I think involving your team as much as you can, and then making sure that if you are going to partake in education, it's just as important, if not more important, to educate your team as well.
It's really important. It's important for you to do that and to bring your team to some of these events as well, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
You don't want to just basically be the projector of information, but involve everybody in that.
Right, because the buy-in part is really important. The cultural and human side of the systems that we talk so much about is so important to making sure that there's actually success there.
Yeah. So what do you think some of the biggest challenges are today for leaders? And maybe I'm talking more of like a macro kind of sense. In
Yeah.
other words, leaders of the AGD, for instance, what do you think some of the biggest things that you see out there? You travel around a lot that we face today.
I think communication is challenging for many people, many organizations, dentistry and not, right? We have great ideas, we do great things, we preserve and protect our profession, but getting that information distilled down into a manageable bite, because that's how people consume information these days, and then getting it into the hands and ears and eyes of the people that need to see it, that is very challenging. And it's always kind of going to be. So continuously refining the way that we communicate. This is a great idea. This is a great example of getting that info out there, but then having it be consistent, having there be follow-up. That piece I think is challenging, and I see that all around the country.
Yeah, no question about it. Because you could have the greatest product, as we all know, right? But if you can't get that message out, it's a big issue. And I would agree with that. Of course, I'm involved in leadership with the AGD, and I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we do have. You have great ideas and great things, and it's very, very difficult, especially in this day and age, to get that message across to a lot of people because there's so many different platforms, right? I know
Hmm.
you're big on Instagram and other things like
Hmm.
that, right? So I'm sure you find those as great outlets for these kind of things.
Yeah, I do. And I think the other important thing, and you mentioned Instagram, so I'll use that as an example, is there's so many self-professed gurus out there selling courses, selling advice. I think it's very important to filter where you get information from and what information you're consuming because is also readily available right now. And I talk to so many people that say that they bought a course on social media or, they subscribed to something and paid all this money. And you're like, well, did you do your research first? Because oftentimes the advice that you get doesn't just have necessarily personal implications, but it can affect your practice and the way you practice too.
That is so true. I am glad you brought that up because that is absolutely so true. Because a lot of times you see these things, especially on Instagram, and you see this amazing dental work or amazing anything, right? And that's not necessarily what always happens or is always the outcome. So, what's the best way? How can you kind of filter through all that? There's so many different things out there. How do you filter through that to make the right choice and to find the right person to follow, if you would, or your right mentor, maybe?
Yeah, I think relying on the organizations that are out there like ours is where you find the vetted information, the vetted data, right? And as well as other fellow members. I think that it's important to watch the clips, right? Kind of consume as much data as you'd like, but then be very intentional about what you're actually going to use. And make sure that it's been vetted and verified and researched and studied. Someone is going to come in and tell me, you know, educate about, I don't know, the revenue cycle management, dental benefits. Well, I want to make sure that that person knows what they're talking about. I want to make sure that they have worked with that, let's call it dental benefits, for a long amount of time. I want to make sure they have experience. I don't just want to watch a clip on Instagram and say, I'm going to go back to my practice and, start doing this way, because you could be doing something that was really wrong.
No doubt about it. And I think one of the important things also to realize is that, especially when it comes to practice management and things like that, I think sometimes we gravitate towards people that are telling us what we want to hear. And sometimes the stark reality is not the case, right? It's not always that. So you want to find the right fit,
Mhm.
but you have to find somebody that's going to tell you like it is, right?
Right, exactly. And I see so many reels and clips of things that have been very edited, right? And you go and you look at what the actual content is or what the offering is, and it's either completely wrong or it's been copied from ChatGPT. And this stuff is being sold out there. So I think you're really looking for, especially when it comes to education, whether it's leadership education and training or anything else, that the source has been vetted and verified. And a lot of that is found within organizations.
Yeah, so it's interesting you mentioned Chat GPT, and there's many others, there's Gemini, and
Hmm.
there's a lot of different other ones out there, and things like that. But and I know you do a lot of writing and you're involved in leadership. How has that impacted? I mean, has that impacted your writing style, the folks that you're, I don't want to say writing against, but your competition and people submissions for articles and things like that? How is that whole landscape
Yeah,
going?
it's interesting. I think making sure that I stayed true to what I believed in, it kind of comes across naturally as authentic rather than canned. If you heard me speak or read some of my earlier writing, if you read it now or listen to me speak, it's still the same voice. It's still kind of the same lessons, just refined over the years. And so making sure that you stay true to what you believe in and that voice, you don't lose that, is kind of, I think, how you are able to make a name for yourself and not, I don't think stand out is a right phrase to use, but just to make sure that, like you said, in this very sometimes crowded field, that you are able to be authentic in that way.
Yeah. How'd you start writing? How'd you get involved in that?
So I chaired the new dentist committee for the New York State Dental Association, and just by virtue of being that in that position, got put in front of rooms of dentists that were very new, residents, students, and that's kind of where it all started, not just the writing, but also the educating and the speaking. And I realized that not just through my wins, but also through my failures that I was experiencing personally and professionally, that maybe being vulnerable would be valuable to someone out there. And that's kind of where it started.
Wow, yeah. So because I mean, I feel like I've always got a lot to say, and I write lectures and things like that, but I've always been challenged to write a book or an article or something like that. So how about some tips or advice for folks like me that, you've got a great idea and you want to write it down, but you want to write it down in a way that someone else is going to read it and be interested. I mean, how do you even do that?
So I make very high level kind of discussion points. I have this idea. So I come up with bullet points that are things that I know I want to hit. And then honestly, George, I walk away. I take a break from it. And then I come back and say, all right, so now looking at it from that 30,000-foot view, what needs to go in each of these sections, right? It's kind of like the you work on something and you get too close to it, you spend too much time, and then if you don't sort of back away and take a look at it, you might have put too much content in there. It might be too dense. You might have lost your point. So that's how I start. It's almost like an outline, and then I fill in the outline. But I make sure that I don't do it all in one go, and I do check in and make sure it's flowing the way that I need to.
Yeah, that's great advice. And yeah, I think that's the way I would normally start would be an outline, but I still have a little trouble sometimes filling in the blanks or making sense of that. What about some, I mean, that's of course that's some advice, but what about some advice for folks that have things they've written and maybe they want to get them published, or maybe how would you go about like submitting something, or how does that all work?
Yeah, so I think especially when you've started to build up a bank of articles that you've written or submissions that you've made, figuring out again, what is it that is special about what you're offering, right? There's tons of practice management out there. There's lots of CE and books and lectures about clinical education out there. What is it that makes what you're offering unique? And what problem are you trying to solve? And I think that piece gets missed a lot when it comes to writing a book, coming up with a new product, giving a lecture. What are you trying to solve for? That's how you create the value, and that's the proposition that you can make.
And then you just find areas and just submit your manuscript.
Correct.
And my understanding, you can only, in other words, you can submit it, but gets picked up somewhere, and that person has the rights to that from that point
Correct.
on
Because
forward.
right. So, like, I have a contract with AGD Impact, right? So, anything that I write, AGD has the rights to that. And if another publication wants it, they have to contact AGD and ask if they can reprint it.
Yeah. And by the way, you do such a fantastic job with AGD
Thank you.
Impact. Always look forward to reading what you have in there.
Thank you.
And that's really good stuff, good advice. So I know one of the things we talked about earlier before we came on was the landscape of dentistry.
Mhm.
So tell me what your perception or what you think this new landscape of dentistry is, because there's a lot of things going on, right? We have, everything from different kind of practice models and new dentists coming out with so much debt and all these kind of things. What's this landscape that we're trying to operate in now?
I think it's the most interesting thing to me is how quickly it's all changing and evolving, even in the last 10 years, last 5 years. I think it's completely different. So you touched on it. There's a lot of debt. There's a lot more dental schools coming out. There's still a workforce shortage. And the challenge is that working in private practice and being a private practice owner isn't for everyone. And I think that that used to be the metric that people measured their success by. And there's so many options. There's so many things you can do with your degree that it's okay if that's not necessarily what you want to do. On the flip side of that, private practice owners, we we don't have the space or the finances to be able to hire all the new grads that are coming out. So whether it's going to work in academia, whether it's a military commitment, whether it's a large group, whatever that is, there's opportunities out there, and that's not something that you need to feel bad about. Private practice ownership is now not just kind of like the primary way or the only path forward for people. That I think is one of the big shifts. The other one is directly, I think, tied to debt. And we can talk about this probably in over 3 or 4 or 10 episodes. But one of the big issues is tied to debt and then reimbursement from dental benefit plans, right? So, George, do you know when dental insurance or why dental insurance was created?
I don't know exactly when or why, but it's probably been a good 60 years now. And I do know that the reimbursements haven't changed much since they were first initiated.
Correct. So dental insurance was created in the 1970s, like you said, as a incentive to attract workers to large corporations. And the average annual maximum in the 70s was basically the same as it is now, whereas the cost of literally everything has gone up. But what happens when the patient, you've got a patient that comes in and says, well, I was told that my insurance covers all of it, and now you have to be the bad guy to say, actually, it doesn't. And now it's the dentist that's overcharging, it's dentistry that's so expensive, it's the patients that are saying no, it's the team members that are upset. Really, it goes back to figuring out, well, who's telling these patients that everything is covered? Well, if they're getting these benefit plans through their HR companies during orientation week, and the HR company says, well, this one takes the least out of your paycheck and this one takes the most out of your paycheck, and they don't go over what it all means, right? And because dentists continue to sign up with plans, that's kind of why the negotiating power has gone away, and one of the reasons that reimbursements have stayed stagnant. So this all requires a lot of, I'm sure, as you can imagine, education and knowledge, and trying to fill that gap because dental school is full of dentistry. And so there's really not, this information isn't being offered at a time where I think it's invaluable, is what I spend most of my non-clinical time doing when I'm educating all around the country.
Yeah, you mentioned so many good things. And of course, I'm an educator at Nova Southeastern in Florida. And I see these kids every day when they're, what they're trying to accomplish and what they have ahead of them. And sometimes great struggles in finding employment, worrying and, trying to find a job. And the other thing is, you mentioned that there aren't as many practices or there's not enough practice to employ them. There's also not enough GPRs to educate them as well. So
Correct. Yeah.
that's a big challenge there as well, right?
Yep. Oh, totally. And I did a GPR, loved my GPR. And for anyone that's listening, I would tell you that you should very seriously consider doing GPR or AGD. Not all of the programs are made the same, as I'm sure you know, but do your research. It is called the practice of dentistry, right? So you practice on plastic teeth, you practice giving each other the shots before you start clinic, you practice in CE. A residency program like a GPR or AGD is one of the very few times that you're going to get paid to continue to practice and sharpen your skills, right? Because otherwise, you're going to be paying lots of money for it. So, for everyone that says that you might take an income hit and it's not worth it, please do your research, do one. I loved my program.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And so, of course, everyone knows that's one of the voids or one of the segments we try to fill with the AGD, right, is education,
Hmm.
because we understand how valuable education it is and how that can help your career. And that's why we offer the fellowship and the mastership and so many other great opportunities, across the country where folks can get involved in that.
Yep.
So yeah, so really good stuff. But so again, let's go back to debt. I mean, when I was in school, I mean, the debt you could expect was about 10% of what it is now.
Yeah.
And I'm much older. You're not young, but not, you're not right out of school, but you're younger than I am. And so, some of your friends maybe, I mean, how has this impacted, their view on the landscape of dentistry, let's say?
Yeah. I think the benefit to the people that do want to be practice owners is that banks will lend dentists money because we pay it back. Do you know, I think we're number two amongst the kind of groups of people that default on their loans the least. We are second to morticians. Interesting fact that I learned morticians do not default on their debts. But whether you have $200,000 of debt or $1 million of debt coming out of school, which George, by the way, is real for some people,
Oh, yeah.
you can get a loan to start a practice or to buy a practice. Now, you'll hear a lot where people say, well, doing that is probably your easiest way to build yourself up and then start paying back the debt, taking on more debt to pay the debt. But it's good debt. The issue is learning to service that debt. And that's where so much of what I talk about, so much of the education that we've talked about comes into play, right? Leading the team, patient communication, dental benefits, understanding how it all goes together. But the part that makes me sad is that I talk to new graduates that are associates and they tell me that they have this goal or hope of being a private practice owner, and it seems so unattainable because they've got this anchor around their ankles, right, which is this gigantic number. And I still think that there is a way to get it done, but you must make sure that you invest in education to know what you're taking on and how you're going to service that debt.
Yeah, it's such a big problem. And I have students of mine who, they meet in dental school and it's fall in love and it's a big love affair and they come and they're all excited and they say, "Oh, we're getting married." And I'm so happy for them. But then the back of my mind, having gone through all this, I'm just saying, well, you just doubled the debt of your household, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Yeah, it's very real for a lot of
and,
people.
and it's very challenging. And I don't know the answer to that. I don't know how that's going to be solved. And as you said, reimbursements are going down, debt's going up, and there's so many different challenges that we face.
Yeah. I will say this because I hear it a lot on dental social media where people are advising, you want to kind of grow yourself in your practice and have more opportunities, go rural, go rural, go rural. Well, going rural comes with its own set of challenges. And this is kind of goes back to why I think having the opportunity to do a general practice residency or an AEGD is so great. You could apply to somewhere in an area where maybe you might not otherwise have thought you want to live, right? And you could make connections in that program, and that might end up being the best thing you did, and you might end up in that place just because you did a year there or 2 years there for the people that aren't geographically constrained. So I challenge dental students to not be myopic and not miss the forest for the trees. And instead of saying, well, where do I want to be like in a year, in 2 years, in 5 years, I tell them to think about what they want their entire life to look like and then go backwards from there and start filling in the holes, kind of make that outline, but of their life and figure out what they need to fill in to have that life.
Yeah. So do you do a lot of coaching with coach consulting or coaching with younger new dentists? Do you
Correct.
have
Correct. So largely the audience that I work with is the new doctors, the new practice owners, the associates. That's kind of where I focus all, like I said, all my non-clinical efforts.
Yeah, well, that group needs a lot too. So that's really good.
Yeah.
Really
Yeah.
good stuff.
It's been very fulfilling to be able to pay my blessings forward. Dentistry has given my family and I so much. And so, like I said, I a long time ago decided that if I was going to kind of be vulnerable and communicate my wins, but also my challenges, that hopefully it would help someone. And I hope it has.
Yeah, and I'm sure you have a great perspective too, because you say your dad was an endodontist, right?
Yep. He's a endodontist, still practicing. My husband's a general dentist, and I'm a general dentist.
Yeah, so you've been through all that, and you can kind of tie it all together. I know when I talk to folks, around the country, I always reflect on my different and varied experiences, and I think that's so valuable when you have a
Yeah.
lot of information to share from different points of view, right?
Correct. Correct. There's not one right or wrong way to do any of it. And again, this is the beauty of dentistry, which I still believe is one of the best small businesses in healthcare out there. Um, but providing that or filling that gap of education, I think is so important, especially for the most vulnerable population in our profession, which is kind of that 0 to 10 year out.
Yeah, yeah. Let's back up to leadership.
Mhm.
AGD's having their leadership
They
LDS
are.
leadership conference in April. I think it's April 24th and 25th of this year, and we're looking forward to having a bunch of folks come out for that. We love that. It's one of my favorite things. We do that every 2 years. So if there's any listeners out there that haven't applied to come, we'd love to have you. So speak to your local component. What advice do you have for some of the younger leaders or somebody that wants to get involved in leadership? I mean, any advice for these folks?
Yeah, I will echo what I'm sure you've heard before, which is find a mentor, with the caveat being you don't need just one. Uh, and what is a mentor anyway, right? A mentor is someone that has a way of looking at a situation or um, even just your life or their life and reflecting because they're looking at it through a lens that you don't have because they've walked some of that path before. They've made the mistakes before. And sometimes when you speak to someone like this, you might hear something that you don't like, right? You might hear criticism, and the important thing is to not get disheartened, but also to know that your mentors can change over time. You can have multiple mentors at once, but I would say lean on the people that are doing the things that you want to be doing, and then have ask the questions. How did you do this, right? What challenges have you faced? If you could do something differently, what would it be? One of the conversations I have with people that are volunteer leaders that are earlier on in their journey or that want to be is make sure that you know how to draw boundaries, right? Because all the things that we sign up for and all the things that you do, I do, all of us do can creep into your personal life and take it over real fast, right? So just make sure that you have boundaries and make sure those boundaries include boundaries around yourself so you have personal time for you still.
Yeah, there's no question about that. So really, it's the work-life balance that you're talking about, and it's something that I've experienced over my career because I was in practice for about 30 years, and I got to the point where I sold my practice and I moved to Florida where I am now, and I thought, well, this would be great. Maybe I'll retire, and that only lasted about 3 months for me because I just couldn't. I couldn't grasp the idea of doing nothing, and I never really developed over the course of my career outlets or hobbies or things that I could grasp onto. And I know that sounds kind of funny, but if it happens to you in the future of your career, when you know, right? So that's really great advice. You've got to have that balance between work, life, family, right?
Yeah, and I think for a lot of people, and I'm guilty of it too, it's a myth. I mean, you just kind of charge forward and say yes to everything and hope that you can take care of yourself and your obligations. But what is important to remember is that something's got to give. Now, I can't be a stellar business owner and also get all my, get everything in by deadline and make sure that I'm flying around the country and showing up to my obligations and then always be an exceptional spouse and never yell at my husband, which maybe sometimes I have, right? Or my parents call and I'm ignoring their calls because I'm on another call. Something has to give. And that's what you have to understand that something's going to give, but are you okay with it? Are you willing to make that compromise? But then don't feel guilty about it.
Yeah, that's great advice. There's no doubt about it. So we talked about your writing, and I know you write for AGD Impact and Dental Economics, and what's the other publication that you write for?
The Journal of the Michigan Dental Association. So I write their new dentist column.
Wow, the new dentist com. So do you kind of focus on and this kind of ties into what we were talking about earlier. When you're looking for material to write, are you focused really on one thing, new dentist, leadership, and things like that, or basically whatever comes into your mind is what you're going with?
Yeah, a lot of it comes from what's going on in my life at that moment, right? What conversation did I just have with someone, an attendee at one of my courses that sticks out in my mind? I really draw from what's going on in my life at the time when I sit and come up with content, specifically when it's recurring content, because I
Yeah,
think
so
that sounds the most fresh and authentic.
yeah, so that's probably, when anytime anything that you read has a personal story to it, it's always much better than
Yeah. So a lot of it is working with a family member, building a business with the family, the challenges of the workforce shortage, patient communication, case acceptance, how to do it better. I also constantly, I take a lot of CE as well. And from that CE, I learn about kind of what's going on right now in dentistry, what people are wanting to hear about, and have the conversations to figure out, okay, this is where I want, kind of the direction of my next set of writing of articles to go.
yeah. Speaking of family and dentistry, what did Dad say when he found out you weren't going to be an endodontist and following his footsteps?
Well, technically, it's his fault. I was going to, and right as I was getting ready to apply, he bought another practice because we have multiple practices. And he was like, wait a second, you can't go into the match. What if you match somewhere far away? How am I going to run all this myself? So technically, it's his fault.
Uh-huh, there you go.
Yeah, so I never stop reminding him of that when he gets grumpy about it.
Very good, very good. And he's in Westchester as well. Is he up there
Correct.
in that way?
Correct. Yep. These are all his practices. Yep.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to see that you settled in a warmer area than Sioux Falls. Nothing against Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I've never been to South Dakota, but it strikes me as a very cold place.
Negative 30 Fahrenheit on MLK Day, and George, the winds blow at 50 miles an hour.
Wow. Oh my gosh. And now I lived in New Jersey for most of my life, so I kind of know what the winters are like. We never had winters like that. So at least you're back in a more
Yeah.
manageable climate, right?
Yes. Yep. 55 Fahrenheit today, which is a blessing.
That's crazy stuff. But anyway, Amrita, it was so great to talk to you.
You as well.
Thanks for coming on the podcast and sharing your experiences. And hopefully, we're looking forward to more great things from the EGD Impact, your articles, and of course all the other publications, Dental Economics, as you said. And maybe we'll have you back on, and we can continue the chat some other time. So thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, really good stuff. So, can you share your contact info if someone would have a question? Do you mind sharing your contact information if someone wants to reach out to you about leadership or any of these
Yeah.
other things?
Dr. Amrita Patel, all one word on Instagram. Send me a DM.
There you go. There you have it. So, I'd also like to thank our producer, Kristen Gover. If you like what you heard, please like and subscribe to our channel. You can always find us on Spotify, the EGD app, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, and of course, YouTube under @General Dentistry. If you have any questions, concerns, comments, or suggestions, please contact us at news@agd.org. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.
This AGD podcast series is sponsored by DHP, one of the largest family-owned full-service dental dealers in the U.S. DHP provides dental and medical supplies, equipment repair, maintenance, technology, and equipment sales to clinics and practices nationwide. AGD members receive exclusive discounts and promotional offers when they buy from DHP. We are especially grateful for DHP's continued support of AGD. Their partnership helps make this podcast and the vital conversations we share possible. Discover why like-minded general dentists work with DHP by visiting their website at www.dhpsupply.com.